Nice. Okay. What's going on, guys? We'll get started in just a second or so. What's going on, Jesse? What's going on with Apple? I'll take a peep at Apple for you. We'll see what's going on. Actually, I remember off the top of my head, I know we had a pretty large sell to open order, which is basically a bearish order. I don't remember the exact strike or expiration. I mean, just the fact that it was a sell to open and it's pretty significant, usually over $1 million, if I'm not mistaken. Kind of signifies that there is a bearish take on Apple. So I will get to that chart in just a second or so after I get through pretty much market analysis on my levels, and then I'll get to that Apple chart for you. But I think the moment's pretty much arrived. We've had what has been just a beautiful melt up the past few days already, going into the end of the week, and so we have finally arrived to what the market has been waiting for, is this whole Jackson Hole event to pretty much be concluded tomorrow, in which we are going to basically hear from Powell, which is expected to be 10 a.m. Eastern tomorrow morning. So about 30 minutes into market open is when we're gonna hear Powell start to talk, and we'll hear what he actually has to say, and whether that ends up being something that the market continues this market melt up, or does he end up being pretty much the reason that we find what is going to be our local top for right now, and we end up closing the week on a lower note. All right. So that's pretty much what I'm gonna be kind of paying attention to again tomorrow. But as far as levels, John, what's going on? Mr. Seriously, what's going on? Can we just have a 50% crash already, please? I think everyone is waiting for that, John. I think yesterday, and this is what I think kind of a little bit more deceiving, and that's the thing that you have to be worried about, and not necessarily worried, but more cognizant about thinking, is that yesterday we had a load of SMH puts that I think everyone was noticing that was dating out towards October. But that was just the fact that maybe that can end up being a hedge, or the other factor is that it also being the fact that it's till October. You have a lot of time for that, and in which case, of course, the premiums got just chewed up alive. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to end up paying out. It's just that those buyers just know that they're buying in early, and they're not necessarily worried about the premium being chopped up because they're expecting it to go in the money regardless. All right. And then I think a few days ago, probably the earlier start of the week, is that we did have IWM, the Russell puts, that just continued to just pour in as well. But I believe those were at least up towards September 16th, which is your September OPEX week. And that was something that I also noticed that I think everyone was taking to the heart as well, thinking that the Russell's going to melt down, that SPY is going to also melt with it. And that's what the part was that's more deceiving to pretty much the retail eyes right now. And I think that's what hopefully some of you avoid, but others may have just pretty much got burned off of it. All right. But that 50% crash, I don't think it's necessarily coming a 50% crash. We are gonna have a nice little dip buy opportunity that's gonna be coming here within the next few weeks. Maybe as early as next week. But 50%, I think that's a little more drastic. All right. I don't think we're gonna necessarily get that type of crash. You're back. Made some money on Nvidia and plug. I'm actually glad to hear that. Nvidia, that was a hell of a reversal. That I was expecting it to attempt to go green, but I was not expecting it to hold green and get that kind of rally. You could probably point to the finger of AMD kind of leading the early surge there for semis, and then Nvidia just literally took them on their back and literally just went all the way there. So that was a hell of a move out of the semis, and that's why the SMH puts I was talking about, that was very deceiving because that price action today, that literally just destroyed this SMH puts. All right. Hopefully, he can take the market. September is usually really bearish too. I don't know exactly if we're going to get an entirely bearish September. That's the thing. I actually believe that we're going to get a little bit of a drop off here, whether it end up being pretty much next week or the week after. But I don't think the entire month of September is necessarily going to be the way that we expect it. And if at this point, if you actually realize nothing we expect to happen is necessarily going to happen. All right. So that's pretty much the big takeaway. All right. Wu, you are mentioning Tesla. I'm assuming you want me to take a look at the chart, so I will get there for you in just a second or two. I do have to get through ES here in just a sec, and then someone asked me about Apple, Jesse, and then I'll get to Tesla for you. All right, Jay, nice to see you, man. I'm really glad to see you. Very heartwarming to see you. All right, you can get lost though. All right, so let me get into futures real quick. All right, pretty much, of course, I mentioned that we have Powell talking at 10 a.m. Eastern, roughly tomorrow morning. I was thinking about whether to swing puts or not. I was actually swaying not to. I prefer to pretty much get my sleep, secure my profits as I did today, and just sleep tight. And I'll wait and see what the market wants to do tomorrow morning. All right. But what I'm basically looking at is, ES is kind of hitting a little bit of my top end range here. I was looking at 4208. That was pretty much my top end range of this entire price action. That was the level I was looking at since yesterday afternoon before close. And it ended up confirming that once we were able to break north of 4181, and we confirmed that breakout over 4187 in that power hour squeeze that we had. So that was a hell of a move. I was looking at 4208 to be my resistance, to be my top, and considering whether I want to swing puts here overnight, but I was not necessarily comfortable. I think we can necessarily push up towards 4250. I believe that would probably be that top end if we likely end up getting some kind of gap up here tomorrow morning and going into Powell more so. So 4250 is going to be that upper end range for me. Otherwise, gap up 4208 is likely going to smack here, which is within probably what, a centimeter of where we are right now. So we'll see if that ends up happening, but I'm more in the camp of we're going to end up seeing a green to red type of move on the back end of whatever Powell is going to pretty much spew out of his mouth. And that'll basically be where we see that green to red move. But the bigger question is, are we going to pretty much see a choppy Friday? Or are we going to end up seeing that meltdown in which it's going to be a drastic move from green to red rather than just a box that they sit us in for a premium chop Friday? That's what my main concern is. That's why more so I did not want to swing puts. I would rather see what kind of drastic price action we have, how much of a significant gap up we end up having, and then I'll pretty much assess how I end up making the trade for the day. All right, but 4208, that's my lower end level I'm watching. Gap up wise, pretty much overextending beyond 4208. I'm watching 4250, and then we'll look to pretty much recurl right back down below those levels. All right. Otherwise, bigger picture, if we can't end up holding 4118, that's when I'm looking for the bigger breakdown. And then I'm going to be targeting 407, 4077 basically is going to be my lower end target, is what I'm looking at for potentially tomorrow and also going into next week until we end up breaking below, and then we'll reassess that. All right. So that's pretty much looking at ES. Jesse, let me get into Apple real quick so I can actually tell you my levels on that one. This is actually pretty beautiful. You are actually in a daily gap fill right now. So that's pretty much the scary part about Apple. I do have resistance sitting at 170.75. That's what I'm looking at right now. If you do end up popping or basically wicking above that 170.75, you're looking at completion of gap fill at 171.31, in which case I would pretty much look to end up getting in those puts there at that 171 half is what I'm looking at. So no, if I'm pretty much giving you my bearish take, 171 half, that's where I will likely end up seeing my top. That's where I'm looking to pretty much get bearish on Tesla, and I'm looking to get an entry for puts to swing into next week. Otherwise, you're pretty much looking to end up projecting 170.75 exactly at that anchor VWAP I have, and then the rollover takes place under 168.22, and we can drop down as low as 165.89, possibly tomorrow or as early as next week. All right. So that's pretty much just giving you the up and down on Apple. Someone, I believe, Wu, you just asked about Tesla. Let's get into Tesla real quick. Tesla gave you a nasty little premium um eat chop just today, most so. I mean, it was literally just chilling around that I think 292, 293 level for most, if not all of the day. We had the bearish cloud alert that went off. I was kind of warning everyone once I saw that cloud alert go off, just because of that kind of tight consolidation I was having, and just the fact that I knew the market was going to end up pushing north. I was more skeptic about that cloud alert end up paying out, and then I think within what 5 minutes after I said that, and it ended up popping $2, which of course Tesla premium wise, that can end up eating you alive just as quickly and hitting a stop loss. So hopefully those of you that pretty much heard me mention that in chat, you did not end up entering that cloud alert. I saw some of you try to force the situation, but that's where you have to know the bigger picture, not necessarily the individual ticker. All right. But looking at price action wise, I'm looking for a break over 298.25 tomorrow. If we do get that break, then I think it's very possible that we could see this end up testing my supply, which is up towards 308, 310 is what I'm looking at for my top end of my supply here, in which I would expect it to end up projecting. Otherwise, breakdown wise, I'm looking to pretty much take out today's low right around that 291, and we could trade down towards 285. And below 285, I think we can wick down as low as this 281 here, is what I'm looking at for downside. All right. So that's pretty much just giving me the up and down. I would likely end up favoring the fact that we end up testing more so at least that 300 mark. That's pretty much the big mental number that I think everyone's looking at. a post stock split, that 300 is going to end up acting as a mental number. And so I would watch to see if it's maybe more so of a quick pop and drop tomorrow morning, and then we end up getting the curl, and we can end up taking out today's low that we had at that 291. All right. So that's Tesla. Outside of that, of course, Nvidia. I think I'd probably be um crazy not to pretty much cover this for that little squeeze that we had from their earnings. This one actually has a little bit more room to the upside, but very minimal. I'm looking at this one up towards 180.99 is what I'm looking at for my resistance. So you want to say what about an air close enough to a $2 move to the upside? So you could see a decent little dollar and change gap up out of this, and then that's where I think we're gonna hit some major resistance on Nvidia, and we should see this curl right back down below 178, and then that'll be the fact whether it ends up giving back this entire rally that I had today, or do we end up getting stuck in a box like I was starting my live pretty much mentioning. We may end up seeing the green to red move, but we may end up getting stuck in a box as this market pretty much consistently just holds up and pressing into these bears. All right, so a bit again, 181 is going to be my top end of that range. I'll be pretty much cognizant about whether the fact maybe we get about a 50% retracement out of this entire squeeze that we had today, which will put you right around this 174 half. Otherwise, if we do see the market aggressively roll over, it would not surprise me to see that we end up giving back this entire squeeze that we had today and put us right back down at that 168 low. All right. So that's another one I will keep an eye on. Outside of that, not too much kind of caught my attention. I was looking at Microsoft. I think that was one that kind of caught my attention. I was watching for Microsoft to kind of make a move on the back end of the squeeze that I was looking at in towards Power Hour. And that's exactly what we got in towards the end of the day. A lot of people were pretty much saying that Microsoft was basically showing us that relative weakness. And if I kind of dial down to basically your 15-minute chart, you can basically see the fact that Microsoft was just relatively entirely just within a range. So it's literally just went in a box. And the fact that I ended up seeing a squeeze coming towards the end of the day, and knowing that Apple was already hitting towards the top end of its range, knowing that Tesla was not necessarily going to have any kind of legs to more so give us more than what it already did, trying to attempt to go green, Microsoft just felt like it was primed to make that move to the end of the day. And that's exactly what you saw. So pretty much looking at this one going into tomorrow. As far as room to the upside here, I do think we can stretch this up towards 281. So Microsoft, being that it showed relative weakness earlier on today, I think this could be the one that shows your relative strength earlier on tomorrow morning, and that could be the reason why the markets end up holding up going into Jackson Hole as Powell's going to talk. So 281.12, that's going to be my resistance tomorrow, and then we should start to see this pretty much roll right back under. All right. Outside of Microsoft, I don't think there's anything else that particularly caught my attention more so. Trying to think if there's anything. Actually, Meta caught my attention today too. This is another one. I believe Sig was talking about this. I don't know if I believe he was talking about the fact that it looked like death, but you have a little bit more room to the upside here. This was more minimal than most in tech, but you can pretty much smack 169.81 as far as upside here on Meta tomorrow. But then I would look for this to curl right back down under 167 half, and this could get particularly ugly for Meta just because of the fact that this is actually ran more so than what it should have. So I'm gonna watch for this one, 169.81. I think that's where your ultimate risk reward is to pretty much get into puts, and then you look for the breakdown to confirm under 167.68, and I think this can trade right back down towards 164 rather quickly. All right, so that's a pretty decent one as far as getting a nice little reversal and getting right close enough into resistance tomorrow morning. But if you actually know what's been more consistent is that I still think that pretty much the room to the upside between tomorrow morning and the time of when Powell is actually going to be talking is very minimal for the upside. And that's why I would rather take my entry tomorrow morning than have swing any kind of puts overnight. And I'll pretty much look to get into puts at resistance that I'm looking at. And that's why I'm calling out the levels that are more specific and very key is trying to get in on those puts at the resistance, and that way you have a better risk reward in terms of your stop loss. All right. So, like I pretty much mentioned Meta, I would preferably like to get in at that resistance of 169.81 and have my stop loss there, and then start to work my way down into that pretty much that breakdown spot of that 168 half, 167 half, and I basically have a more ultimate risk reward uh, based on my entry point. Right. But that's also pretty much confluent with the fact that whether we end up getting a strong reversal to the downside or do we get pretty much a Friday where we get stuck in a box. That's what I'm pretty much in the fact of debating upon whether the Bears end up having their fun tomorrow or do they pretty much continue to just squeeze the bears and kill their premiums, as they have pretty much the entire week? All right. So that's pretty much most of what I wanted to cover. Everything that was pretty much going in towards most of this week that I pretty much saw. But other than that, I think that's pretty much a wrap. Again, Powell's gonna likely say some pretty bearish things. It's just gonna be depending upon whether that ends that quick drop that he's likely gonna end up causing for the broader market. Is it gonna be escalated, or do we pop right back up? And that's what's gonna pretty much form our top end of our range for the gap up. And then his pretty much his talks of that bottom wick or that little meltdown is gonna cause us the bottom range, and that pretty much puts us within a box. All right. But I will leave it as is there. I think I pretty much covered the basis and pretty much what I'm looking at across the board going into tomorrow. So I will leave it there. You guys have a great evening. Let's get ready for some 0 days on Friday, and I will see you guys on live tomorrow morning.